So we're beginning on Kav Zayin Amud Aleph from the Mishnah. And the Mishnah discusses Machlokas, how many meals do you have to eat in the Sukkah on Sukkos? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Arba Asri Seudos Chayav Adam Lechol Basukkah, Achas Bayom Achas Balayla. That every man is required to eat 14 meals in the Sukkah on Sukkos, one at night and one during the day. No, ain ledavar kitzva. There's no measurement for this, meaning there's no requirement to eat 14 meals in the sukkah. If you want to fast and you don't want to eat, you're not required to eat. The one exception, chut mileila yom tov rishon shel chag bilvad. Except even the Chachamim agree that the first night of Sukkot there is a requirement to eat a meal in the sukkah. The Gemara will explain what the reason for this argument is. Then there's another statement in the Gemara. Ve'od amar Rabbi Eliezer. We have another statement from Rabbi Eliezer. Mi shelo achal leila yom tov harishon. If somebody did not eat their meal in the sukkah, the first night of Sukkot, so yashlim leila yom tov ha'achron shel chag. She seems to be saying, we'll see again, the Gemara will go into further detail, that if he didn't eat on the first night, so then he can make up for the fact that he didn't eat in the sukkah the first night of Sukkot on the last day of the Chag, referring to Shmini Atzeres. The Chachamim said, no, that's not true. Ein ledavar tashlumi. You can't make up for the fact, if you didn't eat the first night of Sukkot, you can't make up for that by eating, let's say another meal on Shmini Atzeres. Ve'alzen nemar, and then he quotes a pasuk that comes up in Koheles, me'uvas lo yuchal liskon v'chesron lo yuchal lihi manos. Something which is crooked cannot be fixed, and something which is missing, lacking, cannot be counted. This is a pasuk that's always brought up to pretty much say you missed the boat, that you can't fix the situation. You missed it, and there's no way to possibly make up the fact that you didn't eat in the sukkah on that first night. Just look at some of the Rashis on the Mishnah. Yud Dalet Seudos, Big Mar Mefarish Taima. Again, the Gemara is going to explain what the reason is. Ein ledavar kitzva. The Chachamim said that there's no measurement, there's no amount for how often you have to eat in the sukkah. Im ratza lisanos. If somebody wants to fast on Sukkot, ein anu zikukin lo. We don't get after him and tell him go eat in the sukkah. Ela im yochal lo yochal chutz l'sukkah. However, if he does want to eat, he wants to eat a meal, then he should eat in the sukkah. But we're not going to require him to eat a meal in the first place. Chutz milei yom tov rishon. We said the first night was the exception for the Chachamim. She'ino rashai lisanos k'dialat b'Gemara. Again, the Gemara is going to explain why it's forbidden to fast on the first night. And yashlim. So that was the Rabbi Eliezer says you can make up the Suda that you missed on the first day, on the last day of the Chag. Sudaso zos b'yom tov ha'achron b'shmini atzeres. You can make up this Suda on the last day of the Chag, on Shmini Atzeres. V'afal pi she'eno b'sukkah. Even though on Shmini Atzeres you're not eating in the Sukkah. And again, with Gemara Mifpari Chala. The Gemara is going to ask this question and get into further discussion. Okay, so now the Gemara begins by the first machloket in the Mishnah. Why is it that Rabbi Eliezer thinks 14 meals and the Chachamim only think 1 meal? So my time at the Rabbi Eliezer. So what's his reason? So teishvu kein taduru, the phrase that comes up very often, that you're supposed to sit in the sukkah the same way you would live in your house. Ma dira achas bayom achas balayla, the same way most people, in their houses will have a meal in the morning and a meal in the evening. Af sukkah achas bayom achas balayla. So too when it comes to eating in the sukkah, have 1 meal in the morning, 1 meal in the evening. Teishvu kein taduru. You shouldn't change your habits from the rest of the year. For Rabbanan, they kind of take the same logic and then use it differently. Kidira. Exactly. You can, you should do it the same way you would live in your house. Ma dira ibai achil, ibai lo achil. Regular day of the year, we're not going to require you to eat. If you want to eat a meal, great. And if for some reason you're busy, it's hectic, you don't want to take part in a meal, we're not going to require you to eat a meal. So too, af sukkah nami, ibai achil, ibai lo achil. So to a sukkah, we're not going to require you to eat a meal. Teshvu kein taduru. If you want to eat a meal, great, eat in the sukkah. If you don't want to eat, there is no requirement to eat. Now the question on the Chachamim is going to be, so then why is the first night the exception? If you don't want to eat on the first night, you shouldn't have to eat on the first night. So ihachi afilu leila yom tov rishon nami. So then you shouldn't be required to eat then? So the answer given, Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotzadak, Ne'emar kan chamishasar v'ne'emar chamishasar b'chag hamatzos. So we make a Gzera Shava. It says the word 15 relating to the Chag HaSukkos, and it says the word 15 relating to Chag HaMatzos. And therefore we're going to take the laws that apply to Pesach and apply it over to Sukkos. So Mala Halan, when it comes to eating matzah, Laila Harishon Chova, the Seder night, it's a mitzvah, it's an obligation to eat matzah, Mikan Va'elach Rishus, but the next 6 days of Pesach, it's there's no requirement. If you want to eat matzah, you can. If you don't have to. Afkan. So too in our case, Laila Harishon Chova. So in the sukkah, the first night there's an obligation to eat in the sukkah. Mikan Va'elach Rishus, and then for the next 6 days again, there's no requirement. If you want to eat in the sukkah. But if you don't want to eat, there's no requirement to eat in the sukkah. So then we conclude V'hasa minalan. So now we're saying fine. We compare Pesach Sukkot to Pesach, but how do we know on Pesach the din is that it's only a requirement to eat on the first night? So Amar Kra Ba'erev Tochlu Matzos. So it says talking about the first night, on the evening you should eat matzah Hakasuv Kavu Choba. So again the Torah is stating it as an obligation.
Isn't it a little bit different because it's like a Zman Ram, like a fixed thing, like you gotta have sukkah in the sukkah, and then if there's rain, then you go by matzah, you can have it anytime.
And therefore what?
Therefore you're not bound by any other conditions on Pesach. It's not bound by if there's rain or if there isn't. I know just
no, but so that's why when it comes to rain, we're more strict on the first night because we make this comparison to Pesach.
Right.
So we think there's an obligation to eat. The rest of the week of Sukkot, if it's raining, forget it. You don't wait to eat your meal. You're just not going to eat in there.
Right.
But the first night you might want to wait, because there's actually an obligation to eat in the Sukkah. Okay. What we'll do Rashi's in a second. What emerges from this idea that Chachamim that there's only an obligation to eat the first night of Sukkot because of the connection to matzah. So there's actually a difference in the requirements of how much you need to eat in order to eat in the Sukkah. Meaning, when it comes to eating the rest of the holiday of Sukkot, you need to eat a kibetza, and it really that's I think that we say is that the amount of a suda in order to require you to eat in the sukkah. But since we're making the comparison the first night to Sukkot to Pesach, I apologize. So matzah, there's only an obligation to eat a kazayis. So therefore, on the first night, there's an obligation to eat a kazayis of bread. So that's just one difference lahalacha that emerges from there. Let's just try to look at some of the Rashis that came on the Gemara. Start from the beginning. Mikan va'elach rishus. We said that the next 6 days of the holiday of Pesach, it's up to you if you want to eat matzah. This is what we learned in this last parak of Psachim. The pasuk says that 6 days you should eat matzah, and then on the 7th day it should be atzeres. It's the last day of the Chag. So they make a limud there as well. Mashvi rishus. So it says only 6 days you have to eat matzah, which implies obviously the 7th day there's no obligation. So mashvi rishus, af shisha rishus. So to the 7th day is rishus. So we're going to say that actually applies to all the last 6 days of the Chag. Lefisha shvi bichlal shivas yamim tochal matzos. Because the 7th day is obviously there's another pasuk which says shivas yamim tochal matzos. So, and the 7th day is obviously included in that. V'yatza min haklal. This is going back in the morning in Rabbi Shema. We're talking about the different klalim we have to learn out, the different principles we have to learn out psukim, derive certain laws from the psukim. So we're saying, so v'yatza min haklal, it was taken out of the general rule because it said 7. Then the next time it only said sheishes yamim and then yom hashvi atzeres. So it was taken out of the klal l'lamed she'achilas matzos ha'amur bo eino chova, to tell you that the matzah you eat on the 7th day is not an obligation. Ella just if you want to eat, then you have to eat matzah and not chametz. Below l'lamed al atzmo yatza, it didn't only come to teach that on the 7th day it's a rishus. El l'lamed al haklal kulo yatza, it comes to teach you about the whole principle, meaning every day or every time after the Seder night, it is not an obligation to eat matzah. If you want to eat, you can. If not, no problem. Okay, and the Gemara, and then the next Rashi Vasam Gufei Minalan. We said, how do we know on Pesach it's only a mitzvah the first night? The Laila Rishon Miyachova. That's the question, and the Gemara answered. Okay, good. Now we can move on to the next section of the Gemara, which deals with the next part of the Mishnah. Ve'od Amar Rabbi Eliezer. This was the idea of making up the meal that was missed on the first night, on the last night of the Chag. Ve'od Amar Rabbi Eliezer. So Vehar Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Arba Esrei Seudos Chayav Adam Lechol Basukkah. Achas Bayom Achas Balayla. So the problem is the first part of the Mishnah. In the first part of the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer says you have to eat 14 meals in the Sukkah, one a day and one at night. And the way Rashi understands this question, let's look in Rashi, V'hamar Rabbi Eliezer, he says, V'chivan debiyom acharon lav b'sukkah yasiv, on Shmini Atzeres, you're not allowed to sit in the Sukkah. Let's assume we're in Eretz Yisrael here for a sec. V'im yashav ba, and if you did sit in it, l'shem mitzvah, if you actually sit in the, let's say you want to make up the mitzvah the first night, so you're going to say, oh, Shmini Atzeres, I'm going to sit in the Sukkah like I should have on the first night. So over al bal tosif. So that's actually problematic. You're violating the prohibition of adding on to the mitzvahs. You're not allowed to add on to any mitzvahs that we have. And the Torah says Sukkah is 7 days, not 8 days. So if you're going to go on the 8th day and start thinking it's Sukkah and eating in the Sukkah, that's a problem. So my hashlam of the Sukkah ikahacha. So how can you make it up? How can Rabbi Eliezer possibly be of the opinion that you can make up the meal on the 8th day if it's forbidden to eat in the Sukkah on that day? So the Gemara answers, Amar Bira, which is the name of a Chacham, Amar Rabbi Ami, Chazarbo Rabbi Eliezer. You're right. Rabbi Eliezer retracted on his opinion, on his initial opinion. Meaning what? Chazarbo Rabbi Eliezer, again, let's look in Rashi. Eitzel Chachamim, Lo Marshein L'Davar Kitzvah. Even Rabbi Eliezer agrees that there's no requirement to eat 14 meals in the Sukkah. V'imratza lis ano sisanen. And if you want to fast, he's allowed to. Chutz milei Yom Tov Harishon. Except, again, he's on the first day, he'll agree with Chachamim, there's no obligation to eat, first night. Uveha miya paligalahu. So even though they agree in that respect, he still has one argument with him. He still thinks you can make up this meal. What's the whole precedent to assume that you can make up a meal the first day of Sukkot on Shmini Atzeres? The precedent is the Korban Chagiga. That you're supposed to give the Korban Chagiga on Sukkot. If you can't give it then, you have a whole week of Tashlumin, even on Shmini Atzeres. So we're taking that principle, applying it here to the eating the meals on Sukkot as well.
That's a little different. The Chagiga, at least on Pesach, can be even eaten on Chol Moed. You don't have to wait till...
Oh, no. So even when it comes to Chagiga, you can... That certainly you have all week.
You don't have to wait to Acharon.
So here, why do you have to wait?
Why would you wait to Acharon when I could do it Chol Moed?
Right. So initially I would have said you have to wait to Acharon because if you think Rabbi Eliezer requires you to eat 14 meals, so then every meal you're having is part of the mitzvah, you have to wait until after that's finished until you can make it up. Now that we're saying that he doesn't require you to eat 14, that's a good point. So either maybe the chiddush now is that even on the last day, so maybe we're going to give you an extra day.
Yeah.
If not, I don't know. Maybe we're going to wait. Maybe we want to wait till a similar situation, which would be another Yom Tov, meaning during Chol Moed. That'd be the reason to assume, but I don't know. That's a good question. So those would be my two answers. Either maybe it's a chiddush that even that day, or maybe we want to wait till Yom Tov to make it up. Okay. So now the Gemara continues. Let's go back to the Gemara. Mashlim b'mai. So what does it mean that you're making up a seuda? So ilema berifta. So if you want to say that you're going to eat a meal, so let's say you're going to have you can take out bread, you're going to have a full meal. So seuda diyome ka'achil. So then how are you? That's not making up a seuda. It's Yom Tov. You have a requirement to eat a seuda on Yom Tov as well. So that's not you can't view that as making up. Again, Rashi ilema berifta kilomar. If you want to say tomar sheseudas Yom Tov achron shu soed belechen beliftan v'tzorchei as-seuda tashlim rishon. If you think that the meal, everything that he's eating on the Shmini Atzeres is making up for the fact they didn't have one on the first day of Sukkot. So next Rashi, seuda se diyome kachil. My heker yeshkan. There's no recognition here that you're making up an initial meal that you missed. So my heker yeshkan shedhei l'shem seuda rishona. There's no recognition. You're making up the seuda that you missed on the first day. Halo darko lisod bayom. Yeah, this makes sense. That's what you normally do. So the Gemara continues. Ella my yashlim. What does it mean, yashlim? Yashlim b'mine targima. It means that you can make it up with, I can say some sort of snacks, really. Tanya nami hachim hishlim b'minei targima yatza. So I think what Rashi again says, minei targima la'achar shesilaik, meaning after you complete your meal, we will bring you more food. We will bring you more food. Yaviu parpraos umadani lefanav. We'll bring you different types of desserts, gamperos, fruit, vikistin, vikaflutos, mivushalos. Bring in, I think, different fruits and maybe cooked nuts and different types of food. And that's your way to make it up. You're right. Your meal that you're having is because it's Shmini Atzeres. But after your meal's completed, we'll bring you some more food. So that is, in essence, making up for the fact that you missed the first meal. Just to point out, Tosfos here argues with Rashi, and doesn't think tashlumin means to make up. You're not making up the fact that you missed the first one. He thinks it's actually hashlama, completing, because he also believes, again, when Rashi said chazar bo, what did it mean that he retracted the initial opinion? Rashi explained that it meant that he didn't require to have 14 meals altogether. Tosfos argues on that point, and since he argues on that, he just thinks then tashlumin is from hashlama, just completing it, and then eating this snack serve on the 14th day is able to complete it, but that's just in Tosfos chazar bo. Okay, so now we're going to bring down some stories and talk about some other halachos dealing with the sukkah. Shoshal apotropis shel agrifas hamelech es Rabbi Eliezer. So you can say the head of the household of King Agrippus asked Rabbi Eliezer the following question: Kigon Anya, a person like myself, she'eni ragil lechol ala seuda achas bayom. Maybe he was so busy, I only have one meal during the day. Mahu she'ochel seuda achas ve'pater. So, am I allowed to only have one meal on Sukkot and then fulfill my requirement? Again, because Rabbi Eliezer, so this is one of the proofs of Tosfos, because this story is coming up after we said that Chazar bo, that Rabbi Eliezer retracted, and now here it's implying again that Rabbi Eliezer requires you to have 14 meals. If Rabbi Eliezer is required to have 14 meals, then who cares that he only wants to have one meal a day? You don't need to have any meals according to Chachamim, right? So this is the reason Tosfos thinks he doesn't actually retract on that opinion. Obviously, Rashi would believe that no, this story took place before he changed his mind. But what happening is the head of the household of King Agrippus is coming to Rabbi Eliezer saying, I only eat one meal a day. Am I allowed to do this on Sukkot? So Amar Lo, so Rabbi Eliezer responds, B'chol yom bayom ata mamshich kama parpraos lechavod atzmecha. Every day of the week, you always eat these different types of food that whet your appetite for your own benefit. So lichvod kon the achshav, and now iyata mamshich parperas achas lichvod konech. You can't do this. Can't have one food that will whet your appetite for the honor of your Creator. So let's just look at Rashi, hopefully get a better picture here. So mahu she'ochel su'uda achas bayom, meaning besukkah ve'pater. Am I allowed to do that? So Rashi parpraos mine ma'adanim. So what he's talking about foods, different types of food. Haposkim es b'nei hame'ayim. They're food that whet your appetite. He's talking about food that you would eat, and that would kind of open up your stomach and want you to eat even more. Lios libo mashuch achar apas v'yochel. What it seemed to be saying is that even though he only used to have one meal during the day, I guess he would also have these snacks during that would want him to eat more. So he's saying if you do that during the rest of the week, on Sukkot, just have one of these snacks, open up your appetite, open up your stomach, and have another meal. What Rabbi Eliezer is telling him is that no, you need to have 2 meals a day. It doesn't suffice to have one meal during the day. So again, this shows that Rabbi Eliezer believes there's a requirement for 2 meals a day. So either this is before he retracted his opinion, or he never changed his mind, and he changed his mind relating to something else. Okay, now getting on to a new issue. Ve'od shalu, to ask another question. Kigon ani, sheyesh li shtei nashim, achas b'Tveria, achas b'Tzipori. I have 2 wives, one living in Tveria, one living in Tzipori. And he wants to spend Yontiv with each one of his wives. He doesn't want to be with, he wants to be part of Sukkot with one, part of Sukkot with other. And he says, V'yesh li shtei sukkos, achas b'Tveria, achas b'Tzipori. I have one sukkah in one place and one sukkah in the other place. Mahu she'etze misukkah l'sukkah ve'pater. Am I allowed in the middle of Sukkot to go from one sukkah to another sukkah? I guess for us, we all, I don't know we all, but it's very common for us to eat meals outside of our sukkah. The question seems a bit crazy, so we'll see what the logic is to ask this question. So his response actually is, Amar Lolo. No, you're not allowed to do that. You have to remain in one sukkah the whole time. Shani Omer, I believe, Kol Hayote Misukkah L'Sukkah. If you go from one, the first 3 days of sukkah you eat in one sukkah, then you travel to another city, the last 4 days you eat in another sukkah. Batel Mitzvasa Shel Rishona. You have nullified, uprooted the mitzvah that you did initially. You no longer fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. So let's just look at Rashi. What is going on here? So again, Mahu she'ete misukkah l'sukkah. I'm at the end of the third last line of Rashi. Am I allowed to go from one sukkah to another? Lecho v'lishon hayom bazo l'machar bazo. Can I eat in one sukkah, sleep in another sukkah, eat in one sukkah on Sunday, eat in another sukkah on Monday? So Rabbi Eliezer says, Bitel mitzvasa shel rishona. Afilu yamim she'avru alav. Even the days that have already passed, kvar ivdan lemafreya. You've uprooted them retroactively. Ve'eno mitzvah. You no longer fulfilled your commandment. Kidiyali flakaman. We're going to see it next Amud very soon. Shetzarich leishev kol shiva b'sukkah achas. He believes that you need to eat in the same sukkah 7 days. You change sukkahs, no longer fulfilled your mitzvah. Okay, why is this so? So Tanya Reb Lezer Omer. Ein yotzin misukkah l'sukkah. First of all, again, the same halacha. You can't change sukkahs in the middle of the chag. Ve'in osin sukkah b'chulo shamoed. And furthermore, you're not allowed to build a sukkah in the first place on Chol HaMoed. Chachamim Omrim, they argue both points, and this is what we follow. Yotzi misukkah l'sukkah. First of all, yes, you are allowed to eat one meal here, one meal there, and also ve'osin sukkah b'chulo shamoed. And they also believe that you can build a sukkah for the first time on Chol HaMoed. And both opinions agree, v'shavin she'im nafla, that let's say you built a sukkah before Sukkot. You're in Toronto, it's very windy, your sukkah falls down on the first days of the Chag. Shechozer bona b'chulo shamoed, then you're allowed to rebuild your sukkah. Everyone agrees then you can rebuild your sukkah on Chol HaMoed. Okay, just want to look at the first two Rashis. Again, Ein Yotzi Misukkah L'Sukkah. Again, same point. Rashi. Lecho Bazo V'Lishon Bazo. Eat in one, sleep in the other. O Hayom Bazo, Machar Bazo. Or one day here, next day there. Ve'inosin Sukkah B'chulo Shamoed. Mi Shelo Yasha B'Sukkah Yom Tov Rishon. Again, just highlighting the fact that Rabbi Eliezer thinks if you didn't eat in the sukkah in the first days of the yontiv, you can't then all of a sudden go ahead. Let's say you were out of town and you come back on Chol HaMoed, you can't go ahead and build your sukkah on Chol HaMoed. Okay, so let's go back to the Gemara. What is the reason for this machlokas? What's the basis? My time at Rabbi Eliezer. So what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer? Amar Kra Chag HaSukkos Taseh Lecha Shivas Yamim. The pasuk says that you should make a holiday, make for yourself 7 days. So meaning Asa Sukkah Haruya L'Shiva. You have to build a sukkah that is fit to be eaten for in 7 days. So this is actually only explaining I guess maybe it's explaining both opinions. First of all, he's saying that you have to make a sukkah that's fit to be eaten for 7 days. So first of all, what he's saying there is that it means you have to eat in the sukkah 7 days. And second of all, because of that, you can't build a sukkah for the first time of Chol HaMoed, because now you're only building it for 5 days or 4 days. You're not building it for 7 days. And since the sukkah has to be built to be used for 7 days, you're not allowed to build it on Chol HaMoed. The Rabbanan argue. V'Rabbanan hachi kama rachmana. No, that's not what the Torah means to say. V'Rabbanan hachi kama rachmana. Asa sukkah b'chag. All that means is that 7 days you should have a holiday of Sukkot, so build a sukkah during the holiday, meaning make sure to have a sukkah during the holiday. It doesn't mean that you need to have it for all 7 days, you need to eat in the same one all 7 days. It just means to eat in a sukkah for 7 days during the week. That's it. Let's look at Rashi again. Sorry, let's go back to the third line in Rashi. Asay sukkah l'shem chag shal shivas yamim. This was the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Shmas minea de'ein osin sukkah b'chul shamoed. Therefore, you can't make a sukkah on Chol HaMoed. De'ein al shiva, because you're not making it for 7 days, only 4 days. B'shamina mina, we learn from here de'ein yotzi misukkah l'sukkah, right? And we can learn from here that you also can't change sukkahs in the middle of the chag. Di'im kain, again, lav sukkah l'shivahi. That's not considered a sukkah for 7 days. It's only a sukkah for 4 days. Okay, so now let's go back, and we said they did agree on one point. What was the one point they agreed on? Rabbi Eliezer Chachamim agreed if you built a sukkah and it fell down, you're allowed to rebuild it on Chol HaMoed. So Vishavin, they agree, She'im Nafla, if it falls down, shechozer ubona osa bechulo shamoed. You can rebuild it on chol hamoed. So pshita seems pretty obvious. Why not? I mean, let's say it fell. Let's say it fell on the first day of chol hamoed. So then you just put it right back up in 10 minutes. So it's still a sukkah of 7 days. You waited it the first 2 days. You're going to eat it in the next 5 days. It fell down for 10 minutes. So great. What's the problem? Sumahu de teima. What would you have thought? Hai achrisihi. Maybe you think that once it falls down and then you have to rebuild it, it's considered a new sukkah. So ve'ena l'shiva, and you might think therefore it's not considered a sukkah l'shiva. Kamash malan, it comes to you just not true that it's the same sukkah, it falls down, put it right back up, no issues, no problems. Even Rabbi Eliezer will allow you to rebuild it. Okay.
Maybe this thing only needs the potential to stay up 7 days. In other words, it doesn't matter what day I build it on. As long as this thing is strong enough to last 7 days.
So right, the fact that the Gemara says use the lashon sukkah haruya, you might have thought that.
Yeah.
The problem is that this is also being used to explain Rabbi Eliezer opinion that you can't change sukkahs in the middle. Right? This one is going for both halachos. So since it's going for both, it must be that you have to eat all 7 days. Correct. If it was only going on the idea of chol hamoed, then maybe I could agree with that. But that's why I think it's not so. Okay. So next halacha, Tanya. Back to Gemara. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kashem she'ein adam yotze yidei chovaso b'yom tov harishon shel chag belulavo shel chavero. So when it comes to lulav, this is the whole third parak that we'll get to soon. It deals with this idea that when it comes to the lulav and esrog, you are required to use your own lulav on the first day. Why? Dichsiv ulkachtem lachem. Take for yourself. Bayom harishon pri tzedar kapos tamarim. Mishalachem. So it must be your own lulav. You can't take another one of your. You can't take one from your friend. Kach ein adam yotze yidei chovaso besukaso shel chavero. So too, I can't use your sukkah. You need to have your own sukkah. Tichsiv chag hasukos ta'aseh lecha shivas yamim. Then make for yourself. The holiday of Sukkot, for yourself 7 days. The same way, ulkachtem lachem required you to have your own lulav. So ta'aseh lecha, have your own sukkah. So that's again Rabbi Eliezer. Chachamim omrim, Chachamim argue. Afal pi she'amru ein adam yotze yidei chovaso b'yom tov harishon belulav shel chavero. Even so, you're right. It's true when it comes to lulav and esrog that it has to be your own. Aval yotze yidei chovaso b'sukaso shel chavero. When it comes to sukkah, you're allowed to eat in your friend's sukkah, no problem. Why? Dichsiv. The pasuk says, "Kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael." All the citizens, all of Bnei Yisrael, yeshvu basukos, can sit together in the sukkah. Milamed, and that pasuk teaches us, Shekol Yisrael Re'uyin Leishe B'Sukkah Achas. That, I guess, if it were theoretically possible, all of Yisrael would be allowed to sit in one sukkah, and everyone would be able to fulfill their requirement of eating in the sukkah on the holiday of Sukkot. Okay, so let's just make up some Rashis here. Lachem Mishalachem. So lahotius agazov es hashaul. Again, when it comes to the lulav and esrog, so you're not allowed to eat a stolen lulav or a borrowed lulav. And kol ha'ezrach yeshvu basukos ksiv. And this is the opinion of Chachamim. They said no, kol ha'ezrach, that we can all eat in one. Timashma, I don't really see how they see this from the pasuk. Oh, wait 1 second. I wonder now that the pasuk, the way it's written, even though in the Gemara it's written with a vav, so sukkos, it seems like the plural in the Torah it's written without a vav. So I think then you can read it as maybe like sukkas as the singular. So I think that might be the reason for their opinion. I think it might be yeshvu basukkas. You can all eat in the singular sukkah. So Dimashma Sukkah Achas. I think that's why it implies only one sukkah, because it doesn't have the vav in the Torah. L'chol Yisrael she'yisvu ba'zeh achar zeh. They don't have to eat at the same time. They can take shifts. First shift, second shift. V'i efshar she'yehi lekulan. And it's impossible that this one sukkah belongs to everybody. D'lo mati shave pruta l'chol chad ela al yidei she'ela. I think it's impossible that if all of the Jewish people are eating one sukkah, it's impossible for everybody to have ownership in the sukkah because it's not enough for everybody. The minimum ownership is a pruta. Saying it wouldn't even be enough for everybody to have a pruta in the sukkah. So it must be that if everybody's eating the same sukkah, it's not because it's their own, it's because they're eating in a borrowed sukkah. They're eating in somebody else's sukkah. Okay, so let's go back to the Gemara. So now the Gemara is going to go back and forth because again, the Rabbi Eliezer used the word to teach you that has to be your own sukkah. And then Chachamim argued. So now we're going to go back and forth. Well, how does Rabbi Eliezer learn out Kol HaEzrach? How do the Chachamim learn out what do they do with the word Lecha? So that's what we're going to do right now. For Rabbanan Hai Lecha my darshi base. So what do they do with the word Lecha? What do they darshi from it? B'vayle limute gezula. So even the Chachamim Rabbanan agree that you can't sit in a stolen sukkah. I think this sukkah came up on Tes Amud Aleph. Aval she'ula ksiv kol ha'ezrach, but when it comes to borrowed sukkah, it's certainly permitted because again it says kol ha'ezrach. Everyone need one sukkah. So Rabbi Eliezer hi kol ha'ezrach my abidlei. So what does he do with that pasuk? So mevayile leger shenisgayer bein sayim v'katan shenisgadel bein sayim. So what does Rabbi Eliezer learn from Kol HaEzrach B'Yisrael? He used that to teach you that let's say you have somebody who converts in the middle of the holiday of Sukkot, or you have a child who becomes bar mitzvah in the middle of Sukkot. So what happens? Rabbi Eliezer was of the opinion that you have to eat in the sukkah for all 7 days. You don't eat all 7 days. You miss out on the mitzvah. So what he's saying, Kol HaEzrach teach you that no, all the residents of Israel have to eat in the sukkah. Meaning what? Even if somebody only really became, you could say a resident of Israel, only became obligated in the mitzvah in the middle of Sukkot, they still have to eat in the sukkah. And therefore you have to tweak Rabbi Eliezer's opinion to say not that you have to eat all 7 days in the sukkah. You have to eat however long your obligation is to eat in the sukkah. If your obligation is only 4 days because you came bar mitzvah in the middle, so then you are required to eat for those 4 days and you still fulfill your mitzvah. So then what are the Rabbanan? So how come the Rabbanan don't need to learn out that idea? So for Rabbanan it's obvious. For Rabbanan, kevan she'amru osin sukkah b'chul moed lo eitzrich kra. Since the Rabbanan teach that anyone can build a sukkah in the Chol Moed, so there's no chiddush to say that a katan in the middle who became a gadol in the middle of sukkahs can do the same as well. Okay, now we're going to veer slightly off of the topic of sukkahs, talk about other holiday-related issues. So Tan Rabbanan. Maise Rabbi Eli shahalach lahakbil pnei Rabbi Eliezer Rabbo belud. So Rabbi Eli went on the Chag to greet his rabbi in the city of Lud. Amar lo Eli, Eincha mishovse haregel. So Rabbi Eliezer, his rabbi, said to him, "Do you not, keep the holiday? Do you not rest on this holiday?" So Shahaya Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Rabbi Eliezer said, "Mishabech ani es ha'atzlanim." I praise even the lazy people, shein yotzi mi basehem beregel, who don't want to leave their house on the holiday. Why? Tichsiv v'samachta ata uveisecha, that you are required to celebrate with your household, not just by yourself. You can't just go ahead and leave your wife for the holiday. You're required to celebrate together with her. So I don't want you coming to visit your rabbi. Stay home with your wife. So we ask a question, Ini, does Rabbi Eliezer really believe so? Or is this true? The Hama Rabbi Yitzchak, Minayin shechayav adam lahakbil pnei Rabbo beregel. How do we know there's a requirement to go to be with your Rabbi, greet your Rabbi on the holiday? Shenemar. So the Gemara quotes a pasuk from Menachem. The pasuk is talking about a story with Elisha and the Isha Shunamis. There's a woman who treats Elisha nicely. Elisha promises her to have a kid. She has a kid. The kid dies, and then the woman wants to go back to Elisha to say, what's going on here? Why did you promise me a kid, I think? And then he dies. And on the way, I think it's her husband who says this following pasuk, Madua at holeches elav hayom. Why are you going to him today? Lo chodesh, it's not the new one, v'lo Shabbos. Right? Miklal de b'chodesh v'Shabbos mechayv inish lekavel pnei Rabbi. So I don't know if Chodesh here is referring to the Chag, or maybe it's Rosh Chodesh, but then obviously the Yontiv. He's saying, well, the question that was posed to her is, why are you going to Elisha? You could say is the rabbi now. It's not Shabbos. It's not a holiday. Why are you going to him today? Which
Did
obviously.
Gazi say this to him?
Sorry?
Gazi. His servant, I think, says it. No.
To who?
To the Shulamite woman.
Gechazi is the one who says this? It's possible that, okay, so Gechazi says it? Okay. Okay, good. So Gechazi says it, thank you. That's Elisha's attendant. So either way, what we can infer from here is that on Chodesh, on Shabbos, and it gets Yontiv as well, they would go to the rabbis. So how do you square the two ideas? Rabbi, so lo kasha, no problem. If your rabbi lives nearby and you can go greet him and then come back, so great, you should do so. If he lives far away and you're going to have to miss Yontiv with your family, then you should not do so. Okay. This is now we'll conclude with the last I think sugya of the Amud here. Tana Rabbanan. Ma'aseh again Rabbi Eliezer sheshavas begalgil ha'elyon besukaso shel Yochanan Rabbi Eli bekesari ve'amrilei bekisaryon. So there's a story with Rabbi Eliezer that he was up in the Galil in the sukkah of Yochanan, the son of Rabbi Eli, either in the city of Kesaryon. Now what happens? He giach hamel sukkah. It's starting to get hot. Amar lo, he says to him, Ma'u she'efros aleha sadin. Am I allowed to take a sheet and throw it over the sukkah? So Rashi explains what's the problem here. So Ma'u she'efros aleha sadin litzel. I want to give shade. Shalot teshuz bach hashemesh. I want the sun to go bother us, to burn us. Mi aser. Is this forbidden? Mishum mosif al ohel harai b'Shabbos olo. So we're dealing with an issue. An ohel harai is if you have some sort of temporary building. So let's say the sukkah is a temporary ohel harai. So the question is, are you allowed to be mosif onto an ohel harai on Shabbos? Are you allowed to add on to a temporary, you can say ohel on Shabbos? Meaning, is this a violation of the prohibition of building, of boneh? Or is this permitted because since it's only an ohel arai, it's only temporary? And furthermore, not only is it temporary, but it is an ohel and you're just adding on to it, is that really violating the prohibition of boneh? So can I take this sheet and throw it over the sukkah, right? Obviously they live in Israel, I don't know in Toronto, I know my in-laws in Montreal, what they do is that for the rain and rarely for the snow, they have a tarp that they want to cover their sukkah. It's the same idea. Can you take a tarp and cover your sukkah on Shabbos or Yontiv as well? So Amar lo, so what's his response? What does Rabbi Eliezer respond? Ein lecha kol shevet b'shevet misrael shelo hamid menu shofet. He says, you know what you should know that there's from every tribe in Israel there was a shofet. There was a judge that came from every one of the tribes of Israel. We're referring to the shoftim and Sefer Shoftim, I think even some after. So every tribe had a shofet that came from their tribe. Okay, that's not a response. So what's going on here? So Rashi explains, "En lecha kol shevet," meaning hisio ledavar acher. He's purposely changing the subject. He's trying to get him on a different topic. Why? Kedamrin lekaman. We're going to see that Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion shelo amar davar echad shelo shavam pirabo. He would never say his own halacha. He would only teach that which he heard from his rabbi. And because he never heard his rabbi talk about this halacha of mosif al ohel arai on Shabbos or Yontiv, so he didn't want to say it. So he's trying to change the subject. So he said, you should know this random factoid. So what happens? Now the sun, first it came to the edge, now it's already halfway over, it's starting to get more uncomfortable. Amar lo again, can I spread over this cloth? Amar lo, you should know there are Nevim who come from every one of the tribes. And Shevet Yehuda Binyamin Hamidu Malachim al pi Nevim. And the tribes of Yehuda Binyamin who had the kings, so they were made kings by the Nevim. Okay, again, trying to change the subject. So now it's already getting, the sun's really coming out. It's coming to really the body of Rabbi Eliezer, it's starting to really get hot. So what does his Talmud do? Natal Yochanan Sadin, he takes a sheet, Upirish Aleh, he spreads it over the sukkah. So what happens? Hifshil Rabbi Eliezer Taliso Lachora, Rabbi Eliezer then puts on his robe, his coat, V'yatza. And he left. He wasn't sure this was halachically permissible. And again, now the Gemara explains. Lo fligu bidvarim. He wasn't just trying to make jokes and trying to make fun and throw him off. He would only give over halachos, laws that he heard from his own rabbis, and he never heard this halacha, so he was just trying to avoid the subject. But he wasn't trying to, minimize and demean what he was saying. He just didn't want to give him an answer because that would be against his worldview. So now we're going to ask another question. So la'olam hechi avid hachi. How could Rabbi Eliezer ever do this? Right? What's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer? The Hamar Rabbi Eliezer ein yotzim misukkah l'sukkah. So Rabbi Eliezer thinks that you can change sukkahs in the middle of the Chag. So how would Rabbi Eliezer allowed to go up to the sukkah of his rabbi? Well, it's the other way actually. Yochanan was coming to visit Rabbi Eliezer, but how would he allow him to do that? One sec. Okay, so let's look at. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So let's continue in the Gemara. V'hamar Rebbe Eliezer mishabech ani yasat slaim shinyosim v'atehen. Oh, sorry, I skipped the line. So let's go back. La'olam heichi abid. How can he do this? V'hamar Rebbe Eliezer ein yotzim misukkah l'sukkah. You can't change sukkahs middle of the Chag. So we answer regel acher havai. Which Rashi explains, Kikon Atzeres, by Yoshim Sukkah Mishum Avir. Now, we're not even dealing with a sukkah for the holiday sukkahs. They were sitting outside in a booth because it was nice outside. So it was really Shavuos. So you don't run into that issue of changing sukkahs in the middle of the Chag. Now, another question. How can he not be with his family on the regel? How can he be up where he was? Sorry, beregel. So Shabbos Havai. No, it wasn't a regel, it was Shabbos. So it changes the whole story. They were sitting outside, it was a Shabbos afternoon, and it was getting hot. Can I take a cloth and throw it over the sukkah? So now Gemara concludes, V'tifsho le mididei. Why couldn't he just come up with his own answer? Meaning what? T'tnan. The Mishnah says, Pikak. We want to conclude and give an answer for this idea of, again, being mosif aloha Aryai. You'll have to add on to a temporary structure on Shabbos. So we say, why can't Rabbi Eliezer teach you from another halacha that he taught? T'tnan. The Mishnah says, P'kak hachalon. We're talking about, you can say, a window shutters, trying to close up a window. So are you allowed to put that in? Are you allowed to block up the window on Shabbos? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Bisman shekashur v'talui pokikimbo. If it's tied in already, right, it's all attached, and all you have to do is kind of set it in place, so then it's permitted to put it in on Shabbos. V'im la, but if not, ain't pokikimbo, it's not permitted. So why? Let's look in Rashi, the second last line, shekashur v'talui. So it was tied on sham kol sha'a. So Rabbi Eliezer believes pokikimbo. So you're allowed to put it in. Why? Kevan demitukan ve'omed lekach. Since it's established, right, it's already attached and it's meant for this purpose. Ein ze lo bona v'lo mosif. This isn't considered building. It's not considered adding on, right? It's already attached. All you're doing is putting in something that's already attached. So they're not going to violate the prohibition of building on Shabbos. But the Chachamim omrim v'im lav ain't pokimbo. But if it wasn't attached and you were taking, let's say, a whole new I don't want to say sheet, but you're taking a whole new, I guess, shutter, you can say, and putting it into the window. So then you're not allowed to do it. The mosifu al stimas ohel. Then you're adding on to an ohel. The chachamim omrim ben kach uben kach pokakin. You know what? In both situations, I don't care if it's attached, I don't care if it's not attached. You're allowed to do so. So we see from here that Rabbi Eliezer believes that it's aser to be mosif aloha Aryai, meaning it depends if it's attached or not. So the sadin, which isn't attached, so he should have just given his halachic reason. He already had, he was taught this. Why did he avoid this situation? So we conclude, Hasam hu de mivatel. No, because in the case of the window shutter, so it's mivatel. Because you're putting it into the wall, and it really is becoming, you could say, nullified to the whole wall. And it might actually be considered real binyan. And that's why it's forbidden. Aval hachad lo mivatel lo. But in this case, it's clear that the sheet that you're throwing on the sukkah is separate, completely separate from the sukkah itself. And once it's completely separate from the sukkah itself, you might think that it would be permitted, so he didn't want to give an answer. Just the whole idea of being mosif aloha Aryai. So again, I guess I think we paskin le chachamim that it's really permitted. It can come up in two situations. I think in this situation it would be permitted on Shabbos to cover, let's say, your sukkah, because it already has it already is covered with all the schach, and all you're doing is putting another sheet, so that might be permitted. And it comes up also in the idea of the kids. So it comes with strollers. Are you allowed to put, let's say, a rain cover on top of a stroller? So then it might depend on what kind of stroller you have. If you have a stroller which already has part, some of the fancier new strollers already have, part of the top is already covered, so to add on more isn't the problem. It's only going to be mostly. If you have one of those umbrella strollers and nothing was attached before Shabbos, so it might be problematic to add on, because it's not being mostly follow Aryai, that's actually creating the ohel to begin with. All right, have a good day. Chodesh Tov.